trying to get yourself in trouble. The folks listen to me every day at RadioNext.tv already know kind of where I stand. But it's due and it's time, and we're just proud to have in our studio today your special guest, Derek Okoye, and he will join us in this first hour. We're going to be opening up that can of worms, the Colin Kaepernick situation, his protest against the American flag, the national anthem, and figure out how we as Christian brothers can agree to disagree, open up dialogue that might help us out as a community in understanding where each other comes from. So we're going to have a real good time. The second hour, the tattoo minister, a man who's overcome plenty of obstacles in his life, Todd Durham, will be in, and he's going to talk about how he transformed his life through some adversity. So, Dr. Mark, tell him about Comenius. We're going to give him a song, and then we're coming back. We're not going to play a lot of music today. I'm letting you know.
All right. So Comenius, John Amos Comenius, the famous Moravian pastor from the 17th century, who believed you could see wisdom everywhere in God's world. He was the progenitor, the beginner of something called the encyclopedia. I think we've heard of that before. The idea from a Christian point of view is that in Him, in Jesus, are all things interconnected. He is Lord over all things, Colossians 1 tells us, and that's where we're coming from today and every day that we do this program.
Well, you just stay tuned and listen. Some huge groove is on the dial right now, and when we come back after the next song, we're going to get into this conversation. Get your thoughts together. Get your opinions together. You can join us on Facebook, Harold H.P. Bell, Dr. Mark Eckel, and put your post down, and we'll be right back. You're listening to Warp and Woof Radio on the Cool Groove site, RadioNext.tv.
We are coming back for RESPECT. We are going to be talking about respect today. Looking forward to that. And we're going to be talking about that. But later on, we're going to be playing a bit of Aretha so we can make sure that we get that RESPECT.
You already know, man. We're having a good time up in here, having the opportunity to talk with Derek Okoye. And Derek is Native Hawaiian, I guess we
Native
would like
Hawaiian.
to say. How you doing, man?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Welcome into Warp and Woof Radio, and we've had some already candid conversation before we dove into this dialogue today. And Dr. Mark, I must say, first of all, as my brother, Miss Virginia Eckel, my surrogate mother, just glad that you took the time to dive into this dialogue. As I mentioned before at RadioNext.tv, we have so many topic-specific programs that diving into traditional mainstream news kind of isn't our shtick. So the Colin Kaepernick deal, the San Francisco 49er quarterback, a few weeks ago made a bold protest in refusing to stand for the national anthem, and it caused an outroar of different opinions. And so today we said, let's just dive into it. And with that, we're going to introduce our guest, and then we're going to go into the dialogue. So, Derek, why don't you tell us about yourself, your family, your church, your work? Now, after we know each other, we can start going into it.
Dive into it. Okay. I am a former student of Mr. Eckel. No, you know what? I refuse to say former student. I'm still a student. I still pay attention to everything that you write and read, all of that. So I'm a continuing student. I was raised in Oakland, California. You could draw your conclusions of the upbringing that I had from there. I didn't grow up in the hills. I didn't grow up in the good neighborhoods.
You're talking about Oakland,
California. Yeah, the good old East Bay area. I went to Crossroads. I serve at Northside New Era Church. Pastor Clarence C. Moore. It's my pastor. That's a great man right there, a great pastor. I've learned so much how to love people from that man, and how to love on people, and how to really, he's a real shepherd, man. He really knows his flock. I can tell you that much. Over there, I work with the youth. I work with children. I even teach some adult enrichment hour curriculum or Sunday school curriculum, and write some of it as well.
This is interesting because we're sitting up here with three totally different backgrounds in the room, and I think it's appropriate to talk about this with candor, the situation with Colin Kaepernick. Colin Kaepernick's protest, it's been all over the news in the past couple of weekends, especially with the start of the NFL season this past week. We're going to go around the table, and Dr. Mark, we're going to go with you, then we're going to go to Derek, and then we'll end up with me as we do the Q&A. As I mentioned, we will not spend a lot of time on music interludes today because this is such an important subject matter. But What do you think compelled him to do what he did and where he stood, Mark? Your opinion as an American.
Sure, yeah. And I think that last word that you suggest there is where I'm coming from, as an American. So I think Mr. Kaepernick's perspective is a bold one and an important one, and one for which men and women fight and die in this country to give him that freedom to speak. One of the things that I thought was really impressive and powerful this last week, along with those who refused to stand, knelt, or sat for the national anthem, was the Pittsburgh Steelers, for instance, who all stood for Monday night's national anthem. They have a man on their team, Landro Villanueva, who's the left tackle. Anybody who knows football knows the left tackle's paid big bucks because he protects the backside of the QB. But this man, Villanueva, won the Bronze Star and did 3 tours in Afghanistan. Now, what he did, Villanueva did for Kaepernick, was to provide him the opportunity to not stand, to protest, to speak against those things which he thinks are important. But on the other hand, you have people who are also going to respect the military and the police and make that stand as well, like the Steelers did on Monday night. An interesting connection here, because you have 2 groups of football players who may disagree even within the confines of football itself. So bottom line is, I'm an American, yes. I believe in free speech, yes. Do I necessarily agree with Mr. Kaepernick's perspective or why he decided to make those protests? Absolutely, I agree with his perspective on violence and black men dying in the streets and those kinds of things. I disagree with the opportunity that he has to make a statement along with the national anthem. I think that's pretty important and powerful. As an American, I think that's an issue of respect.
Okay. Derek?
As to why he did it, I'll choose his words, and I won't allude to anything even further beyond it. But he said he's making this stance because of the injustice that's going on. He said specifically that we have black individuals, unarmed individuals, dying at the hands of police, and the police are getting paid leave. There's no reprimand. Let's talk over the last 5 years. There's an average of 1,500 people killed a year by police, and there has only been 5 charges brought. There's only been 1 that has been actually convicted of murder. So along with that, amongst other injustices that are going on, the way that blacks are treated by the police, that's why he is taking the stand. That's why he's standing, and he's using the biggest avenue that he has is that Sunday morning when everyone's watching him. So he's taking that chance to protest. I appreciate his stance because he's taking a stance when everybody's watching. He has his platform. He could stay. He could get his He could have kept all of his endorsements. He could have kept all of his money. Could have done all of that. Stayed quiet. Made his money. But he chose to lose sponsorships. He chose to lose grace in other people's eyes. And actually, I don't think he expected to have the response that he has, because his jersey sales rose to number 1.
Yeah.
And if he didn't, now a lot of people's like, oh, he wants attention. Oh, he's the second string quarterback. He wants attention, or he wants another contract. He said after that he's going to donate all of those extra proceeds to nonprofit organizations to go to the fight to change these injustices. So you see his intent is in the right place. People disagree that says, he shouldn't do it in that fashion. But has there ever been a protest that people agree with?
Never.
Has anyone ever protested and everyone agreed, okay, that's the right way to protest? Okay, so we have riots. Oh, wait, no, you shouldn't riot. Oh, you should have, marches in the street. You have marches in the street, and people say, no, that's not the right way to do it. You should do it more peacefully. And then he has a peaceful protest. He doesn't say a word. He doesn't get angry. He just sits.
And he is standing by his right as an American, as you mentioned, Mark, for those people who came before us to fight to make sure we have the right of free speech. And I was telling you off air, my opinion as an African American male might be different than I was going to be curious to ask you. I know we have a script here, but I'm just telling you because there's a lot of questions that as a Hawaiian, I don't know if it's Samoan is the descent. But I know being from Hawaii, anybody of color has been seemingly put into another box, so to speak, in America. As an African American man who has witnessed it, seen it, have been able to pretty much break it, because I understand education empowerment is more important than anything, and then you're able to deal with things differently when you have a sense of who you are, what you are, and your self-identity is not that big. But in the same token, I applaud him for even taking the risk on losing everything to make a cause and stand for a cause that is relevant. As I mentioned before we went on the air, when you start a race and you start people 50 yards back and you're only doing a 100-yard race, and you still put barriers up in that last 50 yards, and they've got to run 100 yards, and then you look at them and ask, why are you so slow, or why can't you win this race? That's kind of what we're looking at when we talk about the oppression that has taken place over the history in the United States. And even when we try to clean it up, it seems to transfer to another painted room of the same injustice. So the only way it seems like we get dialogue is when you touch something of dear sensitivity to the establishment, which is the flag, which is the national anthem. And it seems like that dialogue now has been created by the stance he's taken. And if it's good, clean, and what our show is about today, how do we agree to disagree and keep dialogue working? I think he did what he should do.
Yeah, this is the kind of thing that we're after here, the idea that we're actually supposed to have some forbearance with each other. This Greek word in the New Testament actually means to be gentle. And so one of the catchwords, the catchphrase for this particular show comes out of Titus 3. And in fact, the line that I wanted to read to everybody today out of Titus 3 is this statement, don't speak evil of anyone, don't be quarrelsome, but be forbearing, which is this concept of gentleness, to be gracious to other people. So it really seems to me, Derek, like, this is an important concept, the graciousness, even when we disagree. How do we go about doing that process?
Understanding one simple thing. Can we play a quick game really quickly?
Yeah, sure.
Let's do this. I want you to tell me this, simply this. Well, play along with me. I'm not gonna. We're gonna play a quick game, but just follow along. Play with this one. What number is that?
6.
No, it's not. I can't believe that you would say that was 6. How are you going to tell me that is 6? Where did you get your education from? What did you do? You got your education from where? Is that even an established place? That's a 9. Do you understand what we just did there? We're looking at a number. I'm looking at it from one direction. He's looking at it from another. It looks like a 9 to me. It looks like a 6 to him. The better way to address that would not me to try to attack your character, but ask you, why do you think that's a 6 instead? Or give me more information on why that is a 6. What information do you have that gives it? So if I cared about you and your opinion, then I would ask those questions. If I'm more interested in being right, I'm going to tell you how you're wrong, how you're stupid, try to attack you. But if I really want to be loving, I'm going to ask you questions like that. So the dynamic that we actually get into, whether it's in arguments in social media, whether it's arguments in public, whether it's arguments with friends, we address it as prosecutor-defender. We need to get away from that and then maybe be a little bit more like the judge and look at the specifics, look at everyone's arguments objectively. And instead of just trying to prove my point and prove me, I'm right, you're wrong, you need to do things my way. It's better to take a step back and look at it objectively and let me see what you're saying, let me see if it is actually right, instead of automatically thinking I'm right all the time.
Yeah, it strikes me as this is Derek's putting his cell phone in front of me doing this little game that we just did. It also strikes me that it would be advantageous if we both sat shoulder to shoulder looking at the screen in the same direction, which really would be helpful, it would seem, and I think that's exactly what you're after.
Mark, it's so interesting that each and every week we talk about getting outside of your culture.
Yes.
To learn more about who you're talking to and who you're trying to address. And you do it all the time. And what I've noticed is after the anger is over and the fear is over, then dialogue happens, because as we first mentioned, leading into our next question, There were so many people who were angry when this first came out, and as Derek said so eloquently, they were judging instead of listening to what he was talking about. And as time has moved on in the last 2.5 weeks or so, you're starting to notice that people are objective, and that they're looking at it from an objective point of view versus attacking him now. And he's got supporters from the people that people were defending. I mean, they were talking about the military and all that, and the military is now saying, hey, that's why we did this.
Yeah, we fought for him to have that freedom.
Yeah. There's an interesting article this morning in the New York Times. I'll just read a quick segment of this. So this the journalist went out and was talking to people in San Francisco, and this is what he said. I put the question of Kaepernick to 2 black men. They sounded a touch uneasy with Kaepernick's activism. They had relatives and friends in the military, so you see how that goes both ways. But they harbored no doubt as to his right, even to the necessity of speaking up. People say he's disrespecting the soldiers, Dominic Sims says, but by speaking up, he's doing what those soldiers fought to protect. And there it is, I think, the end result of all of this when we talk about how people might disagree. Here you have 2 black men who might feel uneasy with the activism, but understand it and realize, hey, this is the country we live in, and we can actually do stuff like this here and protest and not be happy with each other sometimes.
You know what's interesting is I didn't have an emotional feeling about it. Just as a 57-year-old black man, I did not like condemn him and say he's wrong, especially after I heard what he said he was standing for. Because I go out and fight this every day. The life life I lead is the life that he's standing up for. I didn't applaud him. I didn't do anything. My attitude as an individual, he chose that platform because it is a platform that creates dialogue. And we have had more constructive dialogue, I think, about how are we gonna address the problem that we keep ignoring, more so than why he didn't stand up to salute the flag and honor the national anthem. And I think anytime we can create movement, no friction, no movement, he's done that. And so now to say, where's our next steps? How do we say, okay, let's take some proper programming into school? And I know this is your show, but I just have to applaud Cathedral High School, which is creating dialogue just like that. This past Saturday, we had the pleasure of being at Arlington High School, which is struggling financially, struggling academically, and watching Cathedral High School 1.5 miles away say, hey, we're gonna come over here and be partners with this school and help them raise resources and awareness and do educational enrichment programs with this school. It's a start.
And for those who don't know, Cathedral is a private Catholic school, and so the emphasis there is really nice to see that a Christian institution might actually step out on something like that.
That's what was nice.
This is an important issue.
And we're jumping all over the place, and I love your questions that you provided today, but I think right now that leads us into, let's discuss the situation from the Christian perspective, and what biblical ideas should we pursue in our disagreements with others so we can still work together.
Sure. I'm going to let you hand this off to Derek here.
I've already given one illustration. Let me jump into another illustration really quickly. Is my brother. I love him to death. But when we were growing up and we were children, knockout, drag-out fights. But you know what? We would fight and we still love each other after that. And if anyone else said anything bad about him, I'm going to bat for him.
Sure.
That's a little bit of a bad illustration, but close to one. So say if we disagree with something, fine, we could disagree with it, but afterwards we're going to love each other.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to let anyone else speak ill about you either.
Yeah. And this, this goes to the issue of, I'm talking to my brother Derek, or I'm talking to my brother HB, and if something goes down, my first response is I want to take a bullet for that person because they're my friend, I love them, I care about them. Their influence and their impact is huge, and so whatever I can do to step in the middle to say, hey, this is not a good situation, and we want to make sure that we take care of this for this other person. HB, tell this story. This happened at Addicts when we saw the documentary here a few weeks ago, and we were sitting and watching this documentary together, and your friend Tammy sitting there in between, and I'm holding my head in my hands a few times.
It was the most love and the most shame I felt in a long time because I felt bad for you, and you were feeling bad for what someone had done to a population of people. And Tammy just looked at me and said, "Mark felt so bad. Is he okay?" and he's okay. But the reality is, if you don't have that pain when you see injustice, then who are you anyway? And if you don't have the energy like I felt from like, damn, look where we came from. Look what we had to overcome as a people, and we still standing strong. So there's no doubt about the fabric and the quality of each individual. I mean, you know, and that's where you discover that right there. And so my feeling is, you're doing the work, and that's what I try to explain to you. It's not your fault that a system has put people in oppression, and then that a system has made women less than men. It's not your fault. It's not any white person's fault. It's a system that was built. What we have to do is say, how do we get inside this system and say, this was wrong? Let's try to draw it as close to neutral as possible, as close to even as possible under the situation. And so, you know, I think we just have to take an individual approach on how are you going to individually go out here and say, I'm going to change this now that I know this.
Yeah. So what kind of individual approaches do we take in this regard? What are the steps that any of us here at the table are taking to make these kinds of situational changes for others? Anybody want to jump in?
This radio is one of them. It's educational. It's educating the people on one of the issues, and two, what to do, what to change, what practices that we should have, what characters we should possess, and biblical principles that surround those. If we take a look even back at your first illustration of running the race, it's okay right now. Now, it's not appropriate, but let's say, okay, well, I may be starting at 100, he may be starting at 50. That's not necessarily the biggest issue that we need to tackle first. The biggest issue that I've seen with that illustration is that the person who won, who started 50 yards ahead and finished first, turned around and said, I can't believe that you didn't beat me, that you didn't keep up in this race, that you didn't. But he didn't identify that, hey, wait, I do have a lot of obstacles in front of me. I did start 50 yards behind you. They're not identifying those. So sometimes, let me say this, sometimes our white counterpart doesn't identify those things, and or they'll say, hey, that was, you know, slavery was 400 years ago. Well, wait a minute. Let's talk about maybe even the drug issue. Oh, there's so many drugs inside of the urban neighborhood. Black people didn't have planes to bring those in here. And that wasn't something that was like a Colombian cocaine didn't come here, you know, from the urban community. We didn't bring those types of issues and problems here. So it's a little bit deeper than just, hey, stop blaming someone else. I'm not blaming anybody else. I know that I have to address my personal issues. I know I have a personal responsibility for my actions. But you know what? Have a little bit of leniency. Instead of pointing out the flaws or the negative things about me, how about you, address, hey, wait, yes, I have some obstacles in front of me. How about you help me remove some of those obstacles?
Absolutely. And this goes to your illustration of Cathedral.
Yeah.
You know, stepping across the line and helping out, you know, somebody that needs some help. Yeah, this is a huge issue. I was even thinking today, where Derek and I were talking off air before we got on, we've done, 31, 32 shows here at Warp and Woof. And I would say that probably half of my guests have been black, African Americans. Well, is that intentional? Well, you better believe it is. It's intentional because I want to make sure that everybody hears a different point of view, and that we're not just thinking about one thing or one person's perspective or one cultural perspective. We see more than just one.
Well, back to Derek, you know, this is like a word game. You've got stupidity and you've got ignorance. I believe that most of the population of people who are living on the bubble of the platform of being the advantaged one, so to speak, are ignorant to what goes on, because all they were born into was the ignorance of manipulation of people, of ownership of people. And when you're born in it, and we've talked about this before, black people have a lot to get used to and get ready for if they want to move forward, but we also have to accept the fact that the white population had to adjust as well, because when you're born innocent to something and then somebody tells you it's wrong, now you feel like you're being judged for doing nothing but growing up like I am. And I've used this analogy several times. If you're a little white girl, and from the time you're born, you got a little black cook, got a black driver, got black people cleaning your yard, and all these people, and you know, nobody's cussing them out or beating them with whips anymore, but they're pretty much owned by your mom and dad, because that's where they work and that's the suitor. So the little white girl's not prejudiced when she grows up and she goes to hire a little black nanny for her kid, a black driver for. She's not being prejudiced. She's just doing her culture. She's doing what she learned. And so ignorance means you don't even know that you're in it. Stupidity is when you find out and you still choose to, I'm going to do the same things that I did before I knew. And then there's racist and there's prejudice. Racist is a system. Racism is a system. It is a system that you can't stop, I can't stop, Derek can't stop unless we individually say, I'm going to make sure that racist attitudes and racist opinions in my environment don't exist. That's what you can do individually. Prejudice means somebody's done something to you or you've had a bad experience with something and I don't like it. Two different mindsets there. So I think when we start addressing and understanding the differences in what makes things happen, because a lot of black people are prejudiced, deservingly so. Not making it justified, but they're prejudiced against what's happened to them and what they've seen happen to them over the years. So you build up prejudiceness. Racism means we're going to be a system to oppress you, your grandkids, and like you said, Derek, 400 years ago, if it was alcoholism and you dated back 400 years or somebody was an alcoholic in your family, it would be, you're probably going to be an alcoholic. If it was cancer and 400 years worth of cancer has been transferred down in your family, you're okay. Slavery is relevant today in the minds of many of the people who are operating in this black community because they have not had the opportunity to step outside and be educated, be empowered, or see any different than what they were taught. So it's just kind of a narration now.
Yeah, so the bottom line is, what is the tagline for the show? Do good, do good, do good.
Do good.
So we're
But
really
what's your
focused on that.
tagline for today? Because that's more powerful, what you said about culture.
Oh, well, let me go back.
do that.
Yeah, let me go back to my tagline for today. Thanks for bringing that up.
No, it's powerful.
No, it's a very important ideal, I think. I wanted to capture the cultural moment, but not allow the culture to capture us. I'll say that again. I need to capture the cultural moment. In this case, it's about Colin Kaepernick, but not allow the culture to capture us. So from a biblical point of view, from a Christian point of view, we're talking about something that's really an important issue, which kind of leads us to this next question. So how should we Christians show respect for the country that's given us so much, even the freedom to play football, while not allowing the nationalism to drive our beliefs? So the culture is a nationalistic culture. So yes, we're Americans, but it also brings with it all those things you've just well described, HB, that brings with it this culture and this society. So, Derek, how do we deal with this? How do we not allow nationalism to drive our beliefs?
Knowledge is humbling. The more you know you know nothing.
There you go.
Thank you.
But a lot of people don't have that. So a lot of, even when it comes to their nationalistic approach, they don't know that they are culturally, siding on taking their stance because of culture or what they were taught. They don't know necessarily that. I'm not even saying that they're wrong. I could be wrong. I don't know. I could be wrong. At least we have to take a step back and say, hey, I could be wrong. Let me take a closer look at this issue. And again, not having the culture have you, but it's okay to have your culture, but don't let the culture have you. I preached a few weeks back, and the concept, my direction was just for the youth. It was a youth day at my church, and I said, it's okay. I told the parents, I said, it's okay for them to have their music, but don't let the music have them. Like, it's okay, hey, it's okay to appreciate some music. It's okay to appreciate a style, but when that music content is taking you another direction, a negative direction, that's when it's not okay. That's when you need to rid yourself of that. So when we're looking at not having the culture have you have to establish principles of what's right, moral principles and moral character, what's right. And then when you see things in your culture that disregard that or disrespect that, you have to cut those pieces out of. You have to remove those pieces from you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's an important idea, I think, and one that is important to make this comment. Nationalism should not prompt our Christian response. I love this country and I'm glad to be an American, but my Christian beliefs drive my commitments. So culturalism should not prompt my Christian response. I care deeply for the difficulties, the trauma, the tragedy that anybody faces, but we want to do good in the midst of all of this. I will not allow cultural movements to co-opt my Christian beliefs. I'm not going to allow a person or a movement or a situation to say this is the way I should behave or believe simply because it's happened in the culture.
Let me say this. One of the most profound things I found out while dealing with this Colin Kaepernick deal and just responses, and almost to, when the anger first came out, almost to a person, whether it was a sports reporter or whether it was someone that the news people were interviewing, they were saying, how dare him? The ideology, when all I could think about was reading Genesis and Exodus, about the cows and the things that we were worshiping instead of loving each other, and I never heard anything other than that's our flag, that's our song. And this guy is saying, well, we've been oppressing people for 350 years, 400 years, that's why I'm taking this stand. And it was almost like they couldn't even gather what he was saying. I'm thinking, you think more about the flag and the song than you do about this idea of how can we treat our brother better, or how can we treat our sister better. And that, to me, out of the whole thing, it was the most profound thing when the anger first came out, is to listen to people say, I respect this thing more than I respect the people.
That's a really sad perspective.
It's the absolute truth, though.
Yeah, it is.
And when you heard it, it pained me. I said, listen to what people are saying.
Yeah. Well, and it continued even this last weekend. I heard sports reporters say awful things. Frankly, I don't even want to repeat them on the air because I don't want to promote them. But Derek, you said something earlier about your pastor, and you said about him, this really captivated me. You said you've learned more about how to love people from your pastor. Expand on that a little bit and give us an example or two about what he has done in your life or what you've seen him do in his.
I'll start here. This is the one thing that sticks out in my mind more than anything is I have a bad memory. I forget my name sometimes. But I've sat next to this man and I see him remember everyone's name. He makes it personal. He cares about you. He's going to remember your name. He's going to remember your situation, and he's going to go out of his way to show that he loves you. This last week blew my mind. This last week, at the end of service, he was outside waving to people as they leave. They're leaving the parking lot. They're getting in their car and they're leaving, and he's waving to people. I didn't say this to him, but I'm standing next to him. It's like, you're a pastor and you're really doing this right now. I said, I haven't seen it. The most times when I see pastors of large churches, you see them, they're going to duck off and get away on their own. And I'm not saying that's wrong. Again, that's a cultural thing. I'm not saying that's incorrect, but that's what they're culture. But to watch my pastor disregard whatever he's doing, he's going to come outside in the parking lot and just wave to everyone that's leaving his parking lot. And then we're on 30th Street, right off of the freeway. Something could an accident could happen. But he would rather be out there to wave to people to see everyone off than go get rest after preaching 2 services. After being in church for 6 hours, he's going to say goodbye to everyone, shake everyone's hand, and watch them leave.
So the difference being a real kind man that happens to be a pastor instead of a pastor who seems to be a kind man.
Yes, absolutely.
Huge difference.
Yeah, it comes from the inside out.
Yeah. And Mark, my testimony is you. And I mean, when we met, we did not know one another.
Nope.
Our connection was Janelle. But from the point of respect and understanding, I respect the fact that you really, really take the opportunity to not talk about it, but be about it. And just as you mentioned, the guests that you have on your show that are African American, it's not like you're trying to do a stage thing. It's like you have taken serious the fact to know, if I can't connect with people, I can't teach people.
That's right. And
the only way you connect with people is know who they are and the culture that they live in. And that means, just like you said, don't stay in the culture or be the culture, know who you are and move outside of your own so you can embrace other folks and teach other folks. And, that's what I hope to accomplish with this platform. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
this is huge.
Even on an educational level, I think it's also important for every individual to identify the difference between what's cultural and what's biblical. We have biblical principles that should never change. But we have cultural practices that change.
Fashion.
fashion,
as they say.
music, style of music, genre, songs, popular songs. I know a lot of times, my church has been there for well over, I think, almost 100 years now. And of course, 100 years ago, they probably weren't singing. They probably didn't even have the sound system as it is in place now, and maybe not even a band. But they probably, I know I've talked to a few people that have been there for 25, 30 years, and they say, 30 years ago we sang hymns. I like hymns. But again, that was something that was cultural to them, and that's not necessarily a biblical principle that, hey, you have to sing hymns. But we as, the church need to identify that there are things that are biblical principles that we need to stand on. There's biblical principles that are non-negotiable. But then identify that the culture, there's things that are cultural that are going to change. Say, hey, standing for the national anthem may be something that's popular now, but it may not be popular in 100 years from now. I don't know. But identify that the culture will change. So don't be hell-bent on, establishing, hey, you have to do this way. But that's a culture practice. But looking at what does the Bible say that we should do? How should we live? How should we address our brother?
And my concern always is going to be about how the culture actually drives us instead of us driving the culture. How much does the church impact the culture versus the other way around? This is my big concern. And so for my conservative friends, I say, nationalism is not the direction that we go. That's really a cultural driver for us. And to my liberal friends, I would want to say, I want to make sure that there is indeed respect, not only for the place that we live, but the authorities that we have. Certainly Scripture teaches us those kinds of things, as well as making sure that we stand up for those things which are just and against those things which are unjust.
I love Derek's perspective because, in honesty, this country, as I said earlier, we're so different than the country that said we the people. We're so multifaceted, multi-denominational, multi-gender. We're multi-everything now versus that little group of like men that sat in the room. So even with America growing, and I think we have to be aware of the changes that might take place, because with this melting pot now, it's not going to be majority Christian people on Sunday going to church. It's going to be Buddhists. It's going to be Muslims. It's going to be Jewish. It's going to be unorthodox. You go inside the Baptist religion and you got 15 types of Baptists just in Baptists. So, if we expect things to stay the same, the way we knew them, then I think we're being a bit asinine. And as you mentioned, principles like that tree planted by the river, and it's going to stay there, and it's going to be fruitful and keep nourishing. But the fashion that goes around it, the things that go around it, are going to change.
Fall off every year.
Going to fall off, grow back, and they, so we've got to be able to adjust our thinking and be a little more tolerable of some of the changes that are going to take place with this fashion. As a guy who grew up watching my brothers wear suits, I'm an old dude, and I was used to a nice hat, a top coat, a suit when you go out and present yourself as a professional. And some of these little young brothers that I deal with and love up every day, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know the hairdo, the baggy pants. I don't know. All I know is that there's a pure soul that sits inside that fashion box, and I gotta love it versus liking what he's wearing. So, I think we're on the right track, and it's going to take work. It didn't happen in a year. Didn't happen in 2 weeks. So we're going to have to be patient, but we're going to have to be diligent to the messaging that we give out. This is a great start right here. A couple of more questions, then you got a song you want to play about the theme for today.
I actually do want to play that song. So this issue of pastors, we just touched on Derek's pastor here. How do you see the problem of disrespect and not practicing forbearance with our brothers in the church, and how do you think pastors should be helping in this regard?
They have the pulpit, but again, they only have the pulpit a Sunday, maybe a Wednesday. I want to hold them to a little bit of responsibility, but I want to put more responsibility on the individuals who, like me, who every aspect of my day. You taught me this. All of life is theological. So it's not necessarily that. If I have a pulpit, I could reach people. the pulpit can reach someone on Sunday, maybe Wednesday if you have Wednesday as well, but they have a slight responsibility to address these types of things, principles and biblical practices. But then it's going to be the responsibility of the congregation, the body, to take that and go out, live their everyday life. Now, say the pastor cannot. The pastor can't go walk and see everyone that I'm encountering in my day. The pastor can't walk with everyone in this church and see who they're encountering, how they're encountering, and what they're doing with every aspect of life. But it's going to be the body, the church body, that's going to operate as a body and go outside of the physical church home and touch everyone inside of their community. I place more responsibility on the individuals than the pastor. Okay. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a huge issue. When I think about this, brings me back to something I mentioned earlier. When I think about this concept, and I used the metaphor of taking a bullet for you, my view is that if somebody attacks Derek, I'm coming to your defense. If somebody attacks HB, I'm coming to your defense. And when I think of being attacked, I think of verbally attacked or something to this effect. But my general concern, of course, is for my brother. And if we disagree 90% of the time, I don't care. You're still my brother. So my responsibility, you're right, as an individual, is to step out in front to make sure that I'm practicing what I know to be true from what Scripture teaches, and that's to love my neighbor.
I say you have some pastors, and I'm probably a little more harsh than some, not in the ministry, and I'm really, I question a lot of pastors and what they do, because you have pastors that are customer service pastors, and then you have pastors that are salesmen. And the salesman, I like a salesman pastor, because that salesman pastor, a customer service pastor, means you got this nice big church. Every Sunday, the people coming are coming anyway. So you're not doing anything dramatic. You're not doing anything life-changing when you're just servicing your customer. A good shepherd goes out there and tries to give the word of Christ and the principles of how to live and all that to the people out there who don't know. Then if you can sell to people who don't know and transform lives, or plant the seed to help transform lives, I'm just more impressed, just on a personal note. Because to be a customer service rep, all you have to do is open up people going to Walmart. You don't need no classy salespeople at Walmart. You need a customer service guy. Where is this? Where is that? Because they buying anyway. And so I just kind of look at the church like that. And when you talk about your pastor knowing everybody, not knocking the bigger churches, but when you don't know your flock, and I read in my Bible about the shepherd should know and care about all of his sheep. Man, I'm not making this up. That's that tree being planted by the river, standing straight. That's principle. And if you're a pastor, you should be caring about all of your people.
All of those people.
Yeah, and I'm not going to knock the mega churches and everything like that. The way I address that issue is, if that's what God has called you to do, who am I to say? I mean, I've always said I eventually want to enter into full-time ministry, and I've always said, and I'll still stick to this throughout. God, if you have me, pastor one, and that's what you've called me to do, I will be more effective than pastoring 10,000 and to be out of His will.
Yeah, that's a great line. Maybe a good place to end today.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we're really grateful, Derek, for taking the time to spend some time with us today. You have any last words for us?
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate you having me on and even thinking about me in this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm glad you're here. HB, we're glad for your comments here this morning too. It's really good, as you well suggested. 3 different perspectives, 3 different kinds of cultural backgrounds. It's a huge thing.
I think we did all right now. Anybody calling by names, all leaving out it all loved up. So shoot, I think that was great, and I hope that the listeners understand this is how to have proper dialogue. And Derek, you mentioned it perfect. Step back, ask the question of why would that person maybe feel that way, think that way before you're judging and then creating fire with fire.
That's right.
Because nothing ever gets settled when you're not listening. And so the communication factor is really all we're talking about today.
That's right.
Dr. Mark, you ready?
Yeah, we're ready.
Key it up, because we got
Aretha. Respect, Aretha, we do love you and your voice. Take it away now.
You have it queued, or do I have it? I thought you had it queued,
Oh, no,
man.
I didn't have the cue. Well,
Oh man,
we'll just have to do something
I'm
different.
gonna come back and bring it. No, we'll do something different. I thought you had it in your playlist. This is Woof and Woof Radio, Cool Groove Radio at RadioNext.tv.
Hey, we are back. This is RadioNext.tv at the Cool Groove site. This is Warp and Woof Radio. We are really pleased to have had our discussion last hour about the Colin Kaepernick protest in the NFL. Derek was with us, Derek Okoye, and HB and I had a great discussion, and hopefully we actually demonstrated what it means to discuss something where we might disagree about some of the things, but we're always going to love each other and care deeply about who we are in Christ. This particular hour, though, we're going to transition into something that just kind of leads naturally as we discuss the issue of culture, and that is we're bringing our friend Todd Durham, a tattoo artist himself, and some important background to who Derek is, to who Todd is, and what he has done in his life is going to be really important. So, as we always do, Todd, what we're going to do here is just ask you the general question about yourself. Tell us about yourself, your family, your background, and your vocational ministries.
Well, my name is Todd Durham. I do have a lovely wife, Katie. If you're listening, I love you. I have 4 children, and I have 2 grandchildren and 1 on the way.
Congratulations.
We're expecting in about the next 32 days, but it doesn't look like she's going to go that far. I attend a church on the north side called Heartland. It's a multi-campus site. There I am part of the security team. I'm also ordained Stephen's minister through them, so I can actually get in there on the street, so to speak, one-on-one, and kind of lead them to a closer relationship with Christ. Love them well, lead them out, launch them.
Tell us a little bit about the Stevens Ministry and what that does and how you're invested there.
Stephen's ministry is a one-on-one holistic care. You kind of just break the iceberg. What you do is you actually get in there, you kind of climb in the casket with them, you bring them out of their emotional state, you bring them into a rational and a relational state to where they can actually think clearly, cognitively, and then at the same time you build them up into Christ so that Christ becomes their source of help and care, and then they can do the same for others.
What was the process that you went through to get to that place where you could be helping other people through the Stevens ministry?
That's a great question. When I was released from prison not too long ago, God spoke to me through a video at our church about the Stevens ministry. And our church prided itself on training leaders in that capacity to help people, because the pastor's only one man. He can't take it all on himself, the workers. So they trained us up in a 12-week intensive study to actually be the hands and feet of Jesus to those who are struggling. And that's on all levels, all human levels. Struggling with identity all the way to, your everyday divorce where the world tells you it's okay to, because it'll help you move on and get a better life, things like that. So.
The issue of, you just suggested what the world tells you, has a tendency, our culture has a tendency to really focus on self. What would you say to the culture generally and to the people that you're counseling now about that, about what the culture says that your focus should be on yourself?
Selfish.
Kind of easy.
Yeah. That's a tough one, even in the Christian community. I struggle with this because I see a lot of this go on even in the church. People want to prostitute the gospel to get what they want. They want to deduce God's word, take it out of context, and then say, no, this is what that means. But that is just a self-benefit way of saying, well, this is the gospel that's supposed to prosper me and give me the hope in the future, which that is, biggest verse taken out of context of all time.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah, so I heard you say this phrase, which made my eyes go wide, because I don't hear too many people say stuff like this, but I'm really happy you did. You used the phrase, some people prostitute the gospel. So can you give me an example of something that you've seen, maybe just generally in the culture, or maybe a specific example of somebody as an individual that you've seen deal with these kinds of issues?
Well, what's interesting, it kind of leads into what we're about to discuss, because, the gospel can be very distorted, to say the least. Because the Bible is so vast, in the 66 books that we have, there's the law side, and then there's the love side. And people like to use the law to get what they want. They use the law because it offends, things offend them, the way people dress, the way they act, and then apply Christ after the fact. So, like tattoos, we're about to jump into that. A lot of Christians find it offensive, but they never stop to think why. They find it offensive simply because they wouldn't do that themselves. So it brings out something inside them that they're not comfortable with, and they project it on the person who is actually the target, so to speak. So things that we have inside us, we like to push onto other people to try to manipulate and get our own way, try to control, when in all actuality the gospel is the reason why we should accept people for who they are, what they've been through, and what they're going to be going through. That's a difference.
We just finished, as I suggested a few moments ago, in the first segment about the issue of culture, and one of the things that I said in that particular segment early on was that capturing the cultural moment is important to us, but not allowing the culture to capture us is the real key there. So I'll repeat that. Not allowing the culture to capture us is key. So when I heard you say, giving some examples here of what folks do to the gospel, this issue of distorting the gospel, do you think that comes because it's culturally driven, that people have accepted what generally the culture is teaching us to do?
Personally, I think the culture has invaded the church.
Oh, invaded the church.
Yes. And I don't want to disregard all those who have put in the effort and, the blood, the sweat, the tears to actually advance the kingdom. I don't want to diminish that at all. But the consumer church.
Okay.
I won't go there unless this occurs. I won't go there unless this music is played. I won't go there unless, I feel something. But in all actuality, we should go to church to be changed. And sometimes that don't feel good at all. No. I love your connection there to the consumer church, because living in America, we really have a consumption mentality. Yes. We're really interested in what's the next thing that I'm going to have about me and how I'm going to fill my belly. And when I say fill my belly, it's not necessarily a physical entry into the stomach. It's an issue of what can please me and fulfill my desires and those kinds of things. Right. The Old Testament Jews, they actually related their experiences to bodily functions, the stomach, the pain in the groin and the loins, the pain in the heart. That's how they expressed. So I think we're right on line with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the issue of the culture invading the church really kind of sets us back when we stop to think about this. And I, frankly, find it offensive, not because it's wrong, but because I feel it in myself. I mean, I feel the pressure, I feel the compulsion to be like the culture, because being like what Christ expects of me is so much more difficult.
Correct.
So much more difficult.
There was an example, I don't remember the name of the pastor, but in Ohio, he was on a campus, and for nearly 4 years, he started just small groups. They didn't have that large gathering until the point where every small group was crying out for that. And, you know, to me that speaks multitudes, because we're going to the people. We're going to their hurts, their needs, their interactions, and we're bringing the gospel to them instead of them coming and picking and choosing what gospel they want.
Yeah. So this really speaks then to the issue that we want to talk about today, which has to do with tattooing. Just tell us a little bit about your work. Why do you do this work, and why do you think tattooing is important?
Tattooing came to me pre-salvation. I've estimated prior to 1994, 95, somewhere around in there, is when I began. And I was kind of coerced into that from a lot of co-workers. But when I started, I just knew. I knew for a fact that this was going to be a part of me until the day I die. My world fell apart. In my own vanity, I was chasing what I wanted, and I kind of neglected my responsibilities, and that kind of put me in prison. So one of the things that I wrestled with while I was there, for one, it was God. You know, we wrestled the whole time, and I seen His glory. I seen His light. So then it became, well, Lord, what do I do with this? You know, being on the spiritual milk, so to speak, I was one of those Pharisaic, Sadduceic, you know, them Old Testament Jews where you should not put marks or holes on your body. And that comes from the book of Leviticus. So that was one thing that I wrestled with. I say a spiritual babe because I didn't understand the gospel at that time. I didn't have the training. I had the book, but I didn't have the training to truly understand who Christ was and what He did. When I hit the ground, I hit it running because He had changed my life so much that my vision seen in a different perspective. Colors became different. They became brighter. There was a peace, you know. But before my release, I got to that point where, what am I going to do with this, Lord? Because people say that you're not supposed to do that. And then it goes right back to what we said earlier. It becomes offensive to some. You know, at a point in time when tattooing was kind of not so popular in the culture, it was all about biker gangs and, you know, sailors and military people. But as we kind of become more and more acceptable of that, we also can use that. God gives us talents. We have the 1, the 2, the 10, and whatever you do with those talents will be acknowledged when you stand before Him. So I wrestled. Am I going to keep this talent? Am I going to give it away? What do I do with it? How am I going to do with it? And He let me keep it, which was a true blessing. And, you know, we had a couple wrestling matches after that too. I stayed pretty competitive in prices for quite some time because I got a lot of friends in the business. You know, will I point them in a different direction if they want different artwork? I said, yes, absolutely. Go see other people because, you know, they have different, you know, skill levels and things. But when it comes to the pricing, I was losing business. And I couldn't understand why. So God gave me this talent. I put the price on the talent. Well, the talent itself is what should be beneficial. So I asked God one day, I said, well, what do you want me to do with it? And He said, how much are you really worth? In my prayer, He asked me what I was worth. And from then on out, I stopped putting prices on tattoos. I allowed the work to speak for itself.
Wow. This is really a compelling testimony about how you have been changed, not only in prison, but obviously after as well. And just for those who are listening or catch up on the podcast later, just a note about Todd's references here to First Testament teaching. In the book of Leviticus, the emphasis against tattooing, and frankly against a number of things, always goes back to the cultural component of the day. So some of the things that we're dealing with here in terms of tattooing have to do with idolatry, worshiping other gods, being invested within the culture itself, so that it leads the Israelite away from true worship of Yahweh. And that's really what we're after here, is to acknowledge that the book of Leviticus was speaking specifically to a cultural time period, and its application to us is the same in the sense that we don't worship this stuff. I mean, if you get to worshiping the gift you've been given as a tattoo artist, for instance, that would be going in the wrong direction.
Absolutely.
So that's a really important idea to make sure that people connect to, and that there's no disconnect between the testaments here. And so Todd's other point that he wanted to make clear was about the law and love, that the law was actually given for love, at the behest of God's love, to protect people. So it's important for us to kind of make those connections for everybody, especially when it comes to law codes and stuff like that in Leviticus. So many people don't know Leviticus, Remember,
Right.
Leviticus is my second favorite book,
Right.
We got to go there. Well, in our discussion in the past when you and I met, you said about tattoos that the art speaks for itself. That's an interesting phrase, the art speaks for itself. So what does that mean?
I don't want to call it blame shifting, but I can actually shift the art onto what they deem it as it is and what it's worth. You'd be surprised when you ask people, and they say, well, how much is it? And I say, well, just give me what you think it's worth. You'd be surprised at how many people just get confounded by that. Like, how do I price this? When God said, how much are you worth, it wasn't to say you're not worth anything, but it was to say, use this for my glory. You would be surprised at how many people would come time and time again just to sit and talk with me. They're getting a tattoo in the process. So that's become a real big ministry for me. Like I'd mentioned before when we had our first preliminary, if you go sit in a barber shop, if you go sit in a beauty salon, nail salon, just go sit. Don't even get the services, just listen. You'll hear so many hurting people. So what I have done is I brought my ministry into that capacity. It is a culture, it is a community, and it is acceptable by some, but forced away by others. But to me, when I look at it, it's just another opportunity to bring Christ into a situation that otherwise would not even be possible.
So within the focus of your vocation, your calling, the gift that God's given to you, you don't really see a disconnect between that and ministry.
Absolutely not. Absolutely, I do most of my ministry there.
Okay.
So all the training I've been going through, the Bible college, the Stevens ministry, it all is applicable in that position, and it's just phenomenal. It's phenomenal to see God work in situations like that. 9 times out of 10, I just ask questions and let them talk. I don't speak anything until God says gospel. That's it. And I could bring Jesus into that the depths of that soul that has no guidance to get out. And that's different because people don't do that in their profession. I remember writing a paper for you about taking the gospel to the world, the Great Commission, Matthew. And I remember writing a paper for you that said we kind of get so focused on third world missions, and we kind of get focused on taking the water and the bread to those who don't even have that, and that's a great thing. But we miss the concept of taking to the third world country called work, the third world country called that homeless community down under the bridge, the third world country that we call home, Because if we can't minister at home, how are we going to minister to God's church? And we miss that concept. There's no connection there. We're so focused on being the big things that the small things will change the world a lot faster.
And would this also be true in anybody's vocation or anybody's hobby or anybody's calling, that if you're a Christian, it should just be a natural outflow of who you are?
I'm glad you said that. I was just talking to a brother a couple days ago, and he was telling me that one of my friends and family members has an issue with me because every time we talk, every time we have, just banter, conversation, relaxed time watching movies, there's never not a time that I don't go back to Christ. And I believe he said we could be talking about waffles over breakfast and it'll be a sermon. And I sat there and I just kind of, I feel like Jeremiah. I'm wrestling with it because the people want this, but I know God wants that. Do I stop because I am, preaching all the time, or do I continue because God wants me to preach all the time? And that's where that wrestle is. It's with the flesh of others, the flesh of myself, and then, the soul, the eternal spirit of what God wants me to do. If the gospel doesn't, if you don't sweat the gospel, you're not working hard for the gospel.
It sounds like Jeremiah 20 verse 9, that your word is a fire in my bones. If I don't preach, this is not going to be a good thing. You have this big smile on your face over there.
Yes, sir.
You've been studying Jeremiah 20 verse 9, have you?
I've been studying a lot. I've been studying before salvation it was bars, babes, women, booze. When I say bars, I mean that in plural form. Xanax bars, all kinds of things. But the instant God changed me, it became Bibles and, belief and books. Yeah. I've never had a library. And now I just can't get enough,
It's always good to hear that somebody likes books.
Yeah. I guess I'm one of the lucky ones because the change was so gut-wrenching, so heart-stopping that there's no way I could go back. Even if I wanted to, even if I tried, there's no way that I can escape that. And I keep thinking about the hot coal to the lips. And instantly, he had it all. I don't want to say I have it all, but just the change was instant, and I had access to it all. I just have to work for it.
Sure. Yeah, the responsibility is still ours. So let's bring it to the issue of well, let's see. Maybe we should just take a break here. That might be a good idea. So we're going to take a break here. You're listening to RadioNext.tv and the Cool Groove site. This is Warp and Woof Radio. We'll be right back. You're listening to RadioNext.tv and the Cool Groove site. This is Warp and Woof Radio. You hear us every week, Wednesday, 10 to noon. And we are here back in the studio with Todd Durham, and he is going to continue the conversation we started in the first segment about the issue of being a tattoo artist and how he brings Christ and that ministry into his giftedness of tattooing. And so off air, Todd, we were discussing a specific individual who really has been disconnected coming to our country and wants to leave this country to go to a different country. How do you see this kind of focus taking place in the church, in the ministry, and in this particular person's life, and how do you see that going forward in the work of the church?
I was graced by my college to be selected to go to this seminar called the Next Leader Program given by Stephen Moore. And he had taken 55 students from all across the United States and Canada and brought them to one location for a 3-day study seminar, basically upbringing the next leaders for the next couple of generations, because I was the oldest one there, so I'm sure there were 2 generations below me. But we had some spare time, and I ended up meeting this young lady. Her name was Emily Dunbar. And she brought this story to me that was just, it had me in tears. She came to the States when she was 10. And she came here for a different life, and so she can study, to study the Word of God, to be a more effective minister, to, just to put tools in the tool bag. And for the last 11 years, because she's 21 now, she's developed this disdain for the United States. And I don't want to say that she hates the people, and I don't want to say that she hates the country. But what I gathered is she hates the fact that we tell her how to worship. And in this conversation, she was telling me that where she's from, it takes a village to raise a child. And what she meant by that was there was a deeper connection to God, because they had to come to communal support and nurture to help raise somebody up. And that brings in a different relationship with God, because it solely relied upon Him. We gather up all the resources from people in the community, and we supply those to this child that they're upbringing. Well, she said when she come to the States tells her how she should worship God. Restrain your dancing, restrain your shouting, restrain laying prostrate in front of the Lord, restrain, just do the baby Jesus, touchdown Jesus. That's all you're allowed to do. And fighting back tears, you could just tell that she had this spirit that was just, it wasn't 100% right for us to tell her how to how to praise God. And in the community that we have, I think that we're disconnected that way. God calls you, and He calls you to be on fire. But the watered down world kind of wants to put that out, because they don't want to take the time to understand why you're so focused and adamant about that. They don't want to take the time to engage you, because that takes work, that takes time, that takes exposing yourself to something that's different. And we get so caught in our habits, and we get so caught in the way certain preachers preach. We get so caught in the way that certain worship teams worship and praise teams sing, and we just get so caught up in that if it changes, it becomes uncomfortable. So when Ime started crying, and she just broke down in front of me, it hit me to the point where, am I going to allow that to happen to me in this world? I may be a different type of leader. I may be a different type of I don't want to say lead this generation, because I'm already up there, but in the same respect, we have to get back to that root. We have to get back to the true worship and praise. We have to get back to the true dancing and shouting, because He's done such greater things that we can do even together. We have to get to that complete submission to find that complete freedom.
Your work has crossed generations, as you've suggested, and the story that you tell is fantastic. Tell us some of the stories of young men with whom you've helped and intervened, and why your focus is on young men.
I grew up without a father. To this day, I know who he is, but he has no interaction with me. We're even friends on Facebook, and he never says anything. If that tells you,
Wow.
But that's okay, because I have a different father. My heart cries out for those kind of people. These young men that are growing up without their fathers, and even the young men who grow up in households with fathers that are disconnected, because that becomes, it becomes, well, I got to work, and there's no work at home. And there's no there's no bonding between the father and son. It's the mother raises it up, nurtures it. The father never steps in because he's too busy to. And whether you're adopted, whether you come from a broken home, whether you're in a home that doesn't operate and function, godly ways, that has an impact so profound on our entire country. If we don't have men who are really willing to step up and lead kids, we're not going to have anybody to lead this country ever. Then that's where the government steps in and says, well, I'll teach them how to lead. As a Christian, there's a danger in that. There's a I want to call it detrimental danger, because if we can't stand up as godly men, even to those children without fathers, even to those dysfunctional homes, that's a good word. If we don't step in and train those fathers and train those kids and train those men who are supposed to be household leaders when they arrive to that age, then we're going to have such ramifications that our chaos is going to be uncontrollable.
Tell us a story or two about young men with whom you've actually counseled over this time.
There are a couple of, without saying names, because I haven't discussed that with them yet. There are two boys that are in my life who had a very disruptive childhood. And I say disruptive because both of them have the same mother, and both of them were born under addictions, and also born in jail, prison. From what we gather, it's the same mom, but two different dads, and the fathers have never been in their lives. So because of the way they were born, they were immediately put into the system, as we call it. And then finally they got adopted. It just so happens that when they got adopted, they were adopted by a family of two sisters, and they stay in close relationship. But there is a spiritual boundary there. It's more like a concrete barrier that takes the hammer and the chisel, and it takes the blood, the sweat, and tears to break through. They've been to Christian counselors, and they've been diagnosed, and they've also they've been disruptive. we just keep going on with all these D words to describe them, but the truth is, I see something in them that's different. I see something in them that's moldable, that's shapeable, that's acceptable to the gospel. And when I interact with these guys, it's never on a discipline plane. It's always on the love plane. Because if you love them, the discipline comes without them even knowing. I think one of the biggest things that we have to fear in this country is people define their own love, which means the only way you love me is if I get the car, the TV, this. Katie, I love you because I know I'm that way. But at the same time, when we love people, Jesus had this capacity to love them right where they are and bring the gospel in such a way that it made them think, made them change, walk a little different, step a little different, mannerisms changed. Of course, we read over and over that people come to him for the big miracles, to save. But if you look at the context of what you're reading and what's going on around him, you see how Jesus started changing cultures. And if we leave these boys to themselves, there's no telling what's going to happen. So I counseled them. I counseled the stepfather who's actually adopted them, and I want to see them flourish. We find the things they like to do, and then we build Christ into that so they come up that way. And then as that begins to take root and blossom inside their heart, then they actually have this means necessary to take that into every aspect of their life. Of course, it needs guidance, and that's where we as men step in. But at the same time, we also have to let them live and learn, to show how Christ allows people to make their choices, but is still there in the midst of whatever they choose.
So the difficulty, of course, is really on us. We bear the responsibility to help them see a different way to live life. You mentioned fathers, your own father, the lack of fathers in these young men's lives. Why are fathers so important to the development of young men, and what's the church's role in all of this?
That's a very broad question.
Yeah, it is.
Being in prison myself, I studied a lot of statistics. There's a 65% retention rate. Out of those 65% of people who love to be in that lifestyle, I met a lot of men who loved to be in that lifestyle simply because there was no responsibility.
By the lifestyle, you mean being in prison?
In prison,
okay.
Absolutely. Okay. People be released and be back in 3 days, just because they become used to that. I say that because the retention rate of 65%, about 85% of that are fatherless men. Those numbers are probably roundabout. I haven't done much study in that since my release, but if you think about how profound that is, that a lot of the hype about prison in the United States is based on the numbers. There are so many men in prison. Let's just say, for instance, 1 million men in prison in the United States. 85% of them are without fathers. And they lead that because there is no stable environment in the home. There's no father there to teach them, hey, you shouldn't shoot that guy in the face. You shouldn't stab that guy. You shouldn't rob that. There's no father there to do that. And I don't want to dismiss the women who raise children, but they can't raise men. They just can't. And when there's that disconnect, there's that word again. When there's that disconnect in the home, there's no father, then there's no way we can lead our own home effectively. And we see that time and time again in our neighborhoods, our community, brokenness, marriages. We see the ramifications of fathers not doing what God has called them to do.
We had Pastor Hank Hankerson on here some time back in May, as I recall, and just a couple weeks ago I was with Pastor Hankerson again, and he took me to the school right behind his church building. There's a school 105 right behind his church building, and I sat with the principal and the vice principal, and we were talking about education and what they do and so on. And I said, knowing already what Pastor Hankerson had told me, I said, how is it for you in the educational realm when you have young men coming to your school who have no fathers? Both of these women, the principal and the vice principal, immediately there was a physical response, the rolling of the eyes, almost the throwing up of the hands, saying this really is one of our major problems. So Pastor Hankerson has enlisted the aid of 8 or 10 of his men at his church who actually go into this school and begin to spend time with these young men. How important is it for the church to do something like that? Do you see something like that developing out of Stephen's ministry or maybe Heartland, something like that?
I'd hate to say it, but no.
Okay.
I don't know, the dynamics as far as fatherless homes or broken homes through the church I attend. I don't know the geographics of that at all. But collectively, I know Tony Evans does it. He takes men who are willing to invest time, and it's flourished. And there are a lot of godly men being raised and coming up out of that, that ministry he created. I think he's in 9-10 different schools. And it's proven to be effective. As far as my own personal church, I'm not sure.
Okay.
And I don't want to say that just to, make it sound bad, but I do want to say that just because I'm not 100% positive.
Yeah, you're not familiar with what might be going on. So the environment, you described the environment in which you work, and by that, not just the tattoo parlor, but, the reaching out to these young men. You've described this as a world of chaos. A world of chaos. What does that mean?
Just look on every street corner. Just drive through the city and look down the alleys. Jesus said, you fed me when I was hungry. You visited me when I was in prison. When I was thirsty, you gave me a drink. And if you look, there are so many people going without that. When I say chaos, I don't mean like, D-Day where, people are just getting ripped apart. But when I say chaos, I mean that in the most respect, because anything that is not godly is chaotic.
That statement alone is worthy of dropping the mic. I mean,
walking off.
Yeah, walking off. Exactly right. Yeah, anybody without a godly lifestyle or environment is living in chaos. Wow, that's just startling to hear that kind of a comment. But it's true nonetheless. If there isn't a stability and a consistency and a wholeness to life, I mean, we started talking about some of that wholeness issue. We're certainly not going to see it in the lives of the people that we're around.
Correct. On the way over, we were speaking about Bob Dylan, and we got to serve somebody. In that verse, he says, you either serve Satan or you serve the Lord. And I think the more we step away from just our general responsibilities of feeding the hungry, clothing the poor, bringing in the water, I think that it is chaotic because we're so self-centered that it hurts to give somebody something that we cherish.
Yep. So the issue is one of sacrifice always then.
Oh, absolutely. We sacrifice for the benefit of others. And I'm not saying that as Christians we're perfect at that.
No.
There's only one person that has ever been flawless. And we tend to hold ourselves to that standard, but it's not possible. We weren't chosen to take on the sin of the world. We were chosen to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And if we are not willing to get our hands dirty and take off our sandals when needed, then nothing's going to change.
Powerful stuff here. We talked a little bit about prison a few moments ago. What lessons did you learn in prison that have helped you as a returning citizen?
Oh my goodness. Once again, great question. I kind of want to lead it in story form because people kind of, they can grasp that. Imagine growing up as a kid with 204 brothers and sisters. Now put them in a gymnasium where there's no walls and nothing but echo. Give them toys to play with. Give them remote controls to turn TVs with. Give them everything they want and see how they react. That's what it's like in prison. I've seen some things that I don't even want to talk about. I've watched things happen that shouldn't have happened. But the give me mentality was so prevalent that it caused a lot of friction. So I'm sitting there, and of all things, I'm doing my art for one of the guards. And it just, the megaphone in my ears was just so loud, I was on the verge of breaking. Of course, this was before God called me, and I was to the point where I was going to explode. It was chaos on the outside, chaos on the inside. And when you put those two together, it's combustible. I had so much time like that, it was just insane. But God used two gentlemen in this facility to actually wake me up. They were the only two guys in there that had such a peace about them that I was drawn to it. I had to know. And to this day, I still tell the story the same. I don't remember leaving where I was, walking over and sitting down with this man. I don't remember that transition from my bunk to his bunk. And I just went over there and I sat down and I asked him, I said, "How you doing?" It was just intriguing at how, he could have easily said, "Well, I've been doing this for 6 years," because he had. I've been in worse places than this because he had. He could have easily told me that. But the first thing he did was reach for the gospel and give me to John 1:1. What was your question again?
What lessons did you learn in prison?
I did learn that it takes work. And I say that because once the gospel was given to me, I wanted more and more and more and more. And I also say that because I had to repent for 6 days. I don't want to say that because God has this uncanny way of giving you exactly what you need. Some people can repent of all that they've done, all that they think of, and be accepted. Me, I had so much in me that I gave him everything that I could think of, but he had something else that he knew was there. And to this day, I don't know what it was, but I had to pray out of the Psalms, "Lord, cleanse me from these hidden faults." I believe it's 19:12 or something like that. Cleanse me of these hidden faults that I don't even know is there. On day 6, I was done. I just threw my Bible and walked away. I was like, this is false, without saying words I shouldn't say, but this is BS, and I just kind of walked away from it. And it was one of those moments where you knew it was divine intervention, because after I calmed down and I walked away, I went over and picked up the Bible, and guess where it was? Psalm 19. 19:21, I believe. That night I put that in my prayer, and I was changed.
That's
instantly.
amazing. Yeah.
So one thing that I have learned that will be with me from the day I die is it takes work. It takes work to be a Christian.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're justified, but there's a word called sanctification.
Mm-hmm.
And when in this sanctification, we can kind of get complacent with that because he's already done things, and we can walk away and it's like he's already taken care of that. But we should even marvel and glory in that too, as well as marvel and glory in what he is doing.
What a great testimony you have, Todd. I'm so pleased that you've been with us here today. Thanks so much for spending some time. Really grateful for that. Thanks for the story. Thanks for emphasis on tattooing. Whatever it is that we do in life that God has given us to do, we should do it with fire in our bones, right?
Absolutely.
The Jeremiah.
Absolutely.
There it is. So we're really grateful to have had another week here at RadioNext.tv on the Cool Groove site. This is Warp and Woof Radio. We'll see you again next week, 10 to 12 on Wednesday.